Hello. In today's video, we'll be going over the database page in VisualDB. We'll go over the SQL Scratchpad tab, the Diagram tab, and the Tables tab. So let's get right into it. So one thing you might be wondering is, what is this right here, the SQL Scratchpad? Basically, the SQL Scratchpad is a place to execute SQL commands on your database so you can see what the output is. So for example, if I select a table from here, let's say medication, I can just write select star from medication, and basically this just gets all the rows from medication. And if I execute, I'll get all the different rows that are in my medication table. So that's just a pretty basic example. There are more complicated things that we can do. So let's try them. So one thing that we can do with our SQL Scratchpad is we can create new tables within our database. Now, that might be a little bit complicated to do, so what we can do is we can use AI assistance for that. So let's say, for example, we wanted to create a table for event planning. So I can say, create tables for event planning, like this, and I press OK. So now we'll wait for the AI to generate our commands in SQL, and we can see here we've created a couple different tables that we might want. So the first one, we have like an event, there's an event ID, event name, event date, all these good things that we would want, and we can edit them as we want. So for example, if I didn't want an inventory, I can just delete that right away. Now I'm going to keep that, but we can edit it from here. This can be something that you start with and then move from. So what we can do from here is we can modify our prompt. So see, our prompt comes back, and let's say that we want automatic primary keys, because in this example, there aren't automatic primary keys that iterate. So let's add on something like, for primary keys, use the identity column syntax. And if we do that and press OK, we'll wait for it to generate. We'll notice here at the top, our event ID, integer generated always as identity primary key. So basically what this will do is it will generate our primary keys. Now you'll have to keep in mind that this is Postgres specific syntax. So these outputs might be different depending on what you're using, but in this case, this is what it generated. So we have our primary keys, that's great. And from here, what we can do is we can execute this, and we'll see command executed successfully. So the next tab that we're going to look at is our diagram tab here. And basically, if we go down to number 4, because this was the last one that was created, so let's click on them and see what it did. So the first thing, we have our public.attendees. This will be where we put the people who are attending our events, so like their first name, their last name, their email, their phone number. Also, we have our primary key, works correctly. And then we also have our event attendees. And this is basically the table where we associate a singular attendee with an event. So we'll notice here the arrows pointing out of the event attendees table. And basically what this means is the arrow that's near the event attendees table is the many side of the relationship. And then the simple line, that's just the one side of a many to one relationship. So what this means is one event could be matched to many event attendees, right? And event attendees, many of them could be matched to one attendee. So basically, a singular attendee could attend many different events, but because there's many different attendees to one event, we don't want to list that many times in our event table. So that's why we have our event attendees table. And then basically right here, the event ID, that is the foreign key that matches between these two tables. So event ID, this is the primary key of the events table. Also the attendee ID, is the primary key of the attendees table. So all makes sense, looks good. So yeah, that is our diagram that we can look at to see the structure of our database that we have. Next, let's move over to the Tables tab and see what we can do there. So here we can see the table that we just created, the events table. So if we look at the columns, we can see all the stuff we saw before previously in our diagram. And if we go back and click data, currently we don't have any rows in here, but if we did, it'd be here. So we have our event ID, our event name, our event date, all this stuff could be here, and we could actually search too. So if there's enough rows here, it's limited, but for a smaller table, it will display all the different rows that are in our table here. Lower down, we'll see our event attendees. Once again, we can look at the columns, and also here we can see the related tables. So our event attendees was the one that was taking our foreign keys from events and attendees. So that's why they show up here. So if we want to look at the attendees, which is the only one we didn't look at, we can click that here, and here is our attendees table. One more important thing, I'm going to go back to our event attendees table, and we have our related tables here, and basically how we add a foreign key like that is by adding a relationship up here. So we can basically have our column that references another table, that be our event ID in this case, and then we can get our events right here. So yeah, that is adding relationships. So let's go back to the tables tab. And the final thing that I want to touch on is the new table button. So if you don't want to mess with the SQL Scratchpad, the new table is the preferred way of adding tables to Visual DB. So you can see here, you can add a table name, you can add columns, and you can edit it that way. Another thing that you can do for adding tables to Visual DB is the import button. You can upload a data file, and basically when you click that, that will pop open your file management system on your computer. And say, for example, you want to upload a CSV or something like that, you can put that into Visual DB using this option. So that's another way that you can upload different things into Visual DB. All right, so from here, let's go over what we did in this video. First, we started out with the SQL Scratchpad, where you can execute SQL commands on your database and all the tables that you have available in your database. You can also add tables through this way, and don't forget that you have AI assistants to help you out in generating these SQL commands. Second, we went over the diagrams, where you can see the structure of your different tables and the relations that they have. And then finally, we went over tables where you can view all the different tables in your database, look at the columns, look at the data within those tables. So that is the database tab in Visual DB. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.